Let us begin by considering what we mean by suffering. In the West, we often view suffering as something to be avoided at all costs. We run from pain, we numb ourselves with distractions, we seek constant comfort and pleasure. But in doing so, are we not running from life itself? For life, my friends, is not a smooth, uninterrupted stream of bliss. It is a turbulent river full of rapids and calm waters, storms and sunshine. Imagine, if you will, a beautiful garden. In this garden there are flowers of every color, trees reaching towards the sky, and lush green grass beneath your feet. It's a sight to behold, a true masterpiece of nature. But how did this garden come to be? It did spring forth fully formed, perfect and pristine. Of course not. The seeds had to be planted in the dark earth. They had to break open, their protective shells cracking and falling away. The tender shoots had to push through the soil, struggling against gravity and obstacles to reach. And even once the plants have grown, the gardener must prune them, cutting away dead branches and excess growth. To an outside observer, this might look like cruelty. Why would you cut a living plant? But the gardener knows that this temporary pain leads to greater health and beauty. The plant, in its wisdom, doesn't resist the pruning. It doesn't say, "Oh no, please don't cut me." It simply is accepting what comes and growing stronger because of it. We humans, with our complex minds and egos, often lack this simple wisdom. We resist the natural pruning of life, the challenges and difficulties that come our way. We say, "This shouldn't be happening to me, I don't deserve this pain." But my dear friends, in resisting what is, we create even more suffering for ourselves. But consider for a moment the nature of muscle growth. When you exercise, you're essentially damaging your muscle fibers. It's a form of controlled suffering, if you will. Your body responds to this stress by repairing the muscle fibers, making them stronger and more resilient. Without this stress, without this suffering, your muscles would remain weak and undeveloped. The same principle applies to our minds and spirits. When we encounter difficulties, when we face challenges that push us beyond our comfort zones, we're given the opportunity to grow. But growth is not guaranteed. It's a choice we must make. We can choose to shrink back, to hide from the pain, or we can choose to lean into it, to learn from it, to allow it to transform us. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, "But Alan, surely there's enough suffering in the world already. Why should we invite more?" But you see, I'm not suggesting we seek out suffering for its own sake. That would be masochism, not wisdom. What I'm proposing is a shift in perspective, a new way of relating to the inevitable challenges of life. Imagine you're climbing a mountain. As you ascend, your muscles ache, your lungs burn. You may even scrape your hands on the rocks. But with each step, you're getting stronger. You're gaining a new perspective on the world below. And when you reach the summit, the view is breathtaking. Struggle makes the achievement all the sweeter. Life is much like this mountain climb. The difficulties we face are not punishment. They are not obstacles to our happiness. They are the very means by which we grow, by which we discover our true potential. They are the resistance against which we push to become stronger, wiser, more compassionate being. But let's delve deeper into this idea. What exactly do we mean by growth in the materialistic culture we live in? Growth is often equated with accumulation. More money, more possessions, more achievements to add to our resume. But is really growth? Or is it merely expansion of the ego? True growth, I would argue, is not about adding to ourselves, but about peeling away the layers of illusion that separate us from reality. It's about discovering our true nature, which is vast and boundless, connected to all of existence. And this process of discovery often involves letting go, which can be painful. Think about the caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. From the outside, this looks like growth, doesn't it? The caterpillar enters the chrysalis and emerges as a beautiful butterfly. But what's happening inside the chrysalis is not growth in the conventional sense. The caterpillar's body actually breaks down, dissolving into a kind of soup. From this soup, the butterfly's body forms. It's a process of complete transformation, of dying to an old form to be reborn as something new. This, my friends, is the kind of growth I'm talking about. It's not always pretty, it's not always comfortable, but it is always transformative. Now, you might be wondering, if suffering is necessary for growth, does that mean we should seek out suffering? Should we make ourselves miserable in the pursuit of growth? And to that I say, absolutely not. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, provides us with plenty of opportunities for growth without us needing to manufacture more. The key is not to seek suffering, but to be open to the lessons it has to teach us when it inevitably arrives. It's about developing a certain attitude towards life, a willingness to dance with whatever arises, be it pleasure or pain, success. Consider the Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing or effortless action. This doesn't mean sitting around doing nothing. Rather, it's about aligning ourselves with the natural flow of life, like a leaf floating down a river. The leaf doesn't fight the current, nor does it try to speed itself up. It simply allows itself to be carried along, navigating the rapids and the calm waters with equal grace. When we resist the natural flow of life, and we try to control everything, to avoid all pain and difficulty, we create tension. And this tension is itself a form of suffering. But when we learn to flow with life, to accept both the light and the shadow, we find a deep peace that transcends momentary pleasure or pain, the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. It's a part of life, a part of having a physical body and living in a world of duality. Suffering, on the other hand, is our reaction to pain. It's the stories we tell ourselves about our pain, the resistance we put up against it. For example, let's say you stub your toe. The initial sensation is pain, pure and simple. But then your mind kicks in. Why did this have to happen to me? This always happens when I'm in a hurry. I'm so clumsy. This mental chatter, this resistance to what is what turns pain into suffering. But what if we could experience pain without the added layer of suffering? What if we could simply observe the sensation, acknowledge it, without getting caught up in a narrative about it? This is what many spiritual traditions teach through practices like meditation. It's not about eliminating pain, but about changing our relationship. And here's where it gets really interesting. When we learn to be with our pain, to observe it without resistance, something remarkable happens. The pain often diminishes, or at least becomes more manageable. More importantly, we begin to see pain not as an enemy to be avoided, but as a teacher, a catalyst for growth. Think about the times in your life when you've grown the most. Chances are these were not times of ease and comfort. They were times of challenge, of difficulty, perhaps even of crisis. It's when we're pushed out of our comfort zones that we discover what we're truly capable of. Consider the story of the Buddha. He didn't achieve enlightenment by living a life of luxury in his father's palace. He had to leave behind everything he knew to face the harsh realities of sickness, old age, and death. It was through his willingness to confront suffering head-on that he discovered the path to liberation. Or think of any great artist, scientist, or leader. Their greatest works, their most significant contributions, often came from periods of intense struggle. Van Gogh created some of his most beautiful paintings while grappling with mental illness. Einstein developed his theory of relativity during a period of professional frustration and personal turmoil. Nelson Mandela emerged from 27 years of imprisonment not bitter and broken, but with a vision of reconciliation that transformed a nation. These examples are not meant to glorify suffering. They're meant to show that suffering, when approached with the right attitude, can be a powerful catalyst for growth and transformation. Let's be clear. Not all suffering leads to growth. Some suffering is simply destructive, especially when it's prolonged or when we lack the resources to cope with it. The key is in how we respond to suffering. Do we allow it to crush us, or do we use it as fuel for our growth? This is where practices like meditation, self-reflection, and cultivating a support network become crucial. These tools help us develop the resilience and perspective needed to navigate life's challenges. They help us stay centered in the midst of the storm. to find that still point within ourselves from which we can observe and learn from our experiences. Now, I can almost hear some of you thinking, but Alan, what about joy? What about happiness? Are you saying we should embrace misery? Not at all, my friends. Joy and happiness are beautiful, essential parts of life, but they are not the whole of life, just as light is not the whole of existence without darkness. In fact, I would argue that our capacity for joy is directly related to our willingness to embrace all of life, including its difficulties. Think about it. How can we truly appreciate the mountaintop if we've never been in the valley? How can we savor the sweetness of life if we've never tasted its bitterness? It's like the yin and yang symbol in Taoist philosophy. The white and black swirls are not separate, opposing forces. They're interconnected, each containing a seed of the other. Joy contains within it the potential for sorrow, and sorrow contains the seed of joy. They're two sides of the same coin, two aspects of the fullness of life. When we understand this, we stop trying to cling to pleasant experiences and push away unpleasant ones. Instead, we learn to be fully present with whatever arises, knowing that it's all part of the rich tapestry of existence. This doesn't mean we become passive in the face of injustice or unnecessary suffering. On the contrary, when we're truly present and engaged with life, we're moved to act with compassion to alleviate suffering where we can. But we do so without the added burden of resistance, without the tension that comes from fighting against reality. Consider the metaphor of a sword being forged. The metal must be heated in the fire, hammered repeatedly, quenched in water. To the metal, this process might seem like torture. But without this suffering, the sword would never become strong and the skillful blacksmith knows exactly how much heat to apply, how hard to strike, when to quench. They're not being cruel to the metal. They're bringing out its highest potential. Life and its wisdom is like this blacksmith. The challenges we face are not punishments, but opportunities for tempering, for honing, for becoming our best selves. But unlike the metal, we have consciousness. We can choose how to respond to the hammer blows of life. We can resist and become brittle, or we can yield and become strong and flexible. The role of acceptance in growth. When I speak of acceptance, I don't mean resignation or passivity. I mean a deep, courageous acknowledgement of what is. It's about facing reality squarely, without flinching, without trying to prettify it or run away from it. Acceptance is not weakness. It's strength. It takes far more courage to accept life as it is than to live in denial or constant resistance. When we truly accept our current situation, we free up enormous amounts of energy that were previously tied up in resistance. And it's this freed up energy that allows us to grow and change. Paradoxically, it's only when we fully accept ourselves and our circumstances that we become capable of meaningful change. As Carl Rogers, the famous psychologist, said, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. This principle applies not just to individuals, but to societies as well. Think about social movements that have brought about significant change. They didn't start by denying the reality of oppression or injustice. They started by fully acknowledging it, by saying, this is how things are and it's not acceptable. It was this clear-eyed acceptance of reality that gave them the power to work for change. Now, I want to address something that might be troubling some of you. You might be thinking, but Alan, I've been through really difficult times and I didn't grow. I just felt broken and lost. And to that I say, not all suffering leads automatically to growth. Sometimes suffering can overwhelm us, especially if we lack support or the necessary tools to process it. But here's the too late to derive meaning from our suffering, to use it as a catalyst for growth. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, wrote about this in his book Man's Search for Meaning. He observed that the prisoners who were most likely to survive were those who found meaning in their suffering, who used it as an opportunity to deepen their spiritual lives or to help others. This doesn't mean that their suffering was good or necessary. It means that they chose to use it as a tool for growth, rather than allowing it to destroy them. And this choice is always available to us, no matter what we've been through. Let's be choosing to grow through our suffering. Doesn't mean we have to do it alone. In fact, one of the most powerful ways we can grow is by reaching out to others, by building connections and community. When we share our struggles with others, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we create the possibility for deep healing and transformation. This brings us to an important portion in growth. Compassion for ourselves and for others is like a soothing balm that allows us to stay open and receptive even in the face of difficulty. Without compassion, the pain of growth can become too much to bear, and we may shut down or become hard and bitter. Self-compassion is particularly crucial. Many of us have an inner critic that berates us for our failures and shortcomings, but this harsh inner voice doesn't motivate us to grow. It paralyzes us with shame and fear. Learning to treat ourselves with kindness and understanding, especially when we're struggling, creates a safe space for growth and learning. And when we cultivate compassion for ourselves, we naturally become more compassionate towards others. We recognize that everyone is fighting their own battles, facing their own challenges. This understanding fosters connection and empathy, which are themselves powerful catalysts for growth. Now, let's talk about fear. Fear is often what holds us back from growth. We fear the unknown, we fear failure, we fear the pain that might come with change. But here's a radical thought. What if we could embrace our fear? What if, instead of seeing it as an obstacle, we could see it as a signpost point? Fear often arises when we're on the edge of our comfort zone, when we're about to step into new territory. In this sense, fear can be a valuable indicator that we're about to grow. The key is to acknowledge the fear without letting it paralyze us. We can say, yes, I'm afraid, and I'm going to take this step anyway. This doesn't mean being reckless or ignoring genuine danger. It means developing a more nuanced relationship with fear, recognizing when it's protecting us from real threats and when it's simply trying to keep us in our familiar, comfortable rut. Remember, growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. It happens when you're willing to step into the unknown, to risk failure and disappointment in pursuit of something greater. Every time you face your fears, every time you choose growth over comfort, you're expanding your capacity for life. Let's also consider the role of mindset in growth through suffering. Carol Dweck, the psychologist at Stanford University, has done extensive research on what she calls fixed versus growth mindsets. People with a fixed mindset believe their qualities are carved in stone. They have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and that's that. Those with a growth mindset, on the other hand, believe that their basic qualities can be cultivated through effort. This difference in mindset has profound implications for how people approach challenges and setbacks. Those with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges, give up easily, and see effort as fruitless. They're more likely to interpret setbacks as evidence of their limitations. Those with a growth mindset, however, embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, and see effort as the path to mastery. The beautiful thing is that mindsets can change. By understanding the growth mindset and deliberately cultivating it, we can dramatically increase our capacity for growth, even through difficult times. We can learn to see challenges not as threats to our self-image, but as opportunities for learning and development. This brings us to an important point: the role of perspective in our growth. How we frame our experiences has a profound impact on how we respond to them. If we see suffering as meaningless or as a punishment, we're likely to become bitter or But if we can find meaning in our suffering, if we can see it as part of our growth journey, we're much more likely to emerge stronger and wiser. Viktor Frankl, who we mentioned earlier, put it this way: everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. Last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This freedom to choose our attitude, to choose how we interpret and respond to our experiences, is perhaps the most powerful tool we have for growth. Now, I want to address something that might be on some of your minds. You might be thinking, this all sounds well and good, but what about real tragedy? What about devastating loss or trauma? How can we possibly grow from that? And these are valid questions. There are indeed experiences that can shake us to our core, that can make us question everything we thought we knew about life. But even in the face of such profound suffering, growth is possible. In fact, there's a whole field of study called post-traumatic growth that explores how people can experience positive change as a result of struggling with highly challenging life circumstances. This doesn't mean that the trauma was good or necessary, but that in grappling with it, people sometimes discover strength, resilience, and capacities they never knew they had. Researchers have identified several areas where post-traumatic growth. Often, people report improved relationships. They discover new possibilities for their lives. They gain a greater appreciation for life. They experience spiritual growth. And they discover personal strength they didn't know they possessed. Again, this doesn't happen automatically. It requires a willingness to engage with the pain, to wrestle with difficult questions, to rebuild one's understanding of the world. It often requires support from others and sometimes professional help. But the possibility for growth exists, even in our darkest moments. It brings us to an important point. The role of meaning in our growth. When we can connect our suffering to a larger purpose or meaning, it becomes more bearable. It becomes a journey towards something, rather than just a painful experience to be endured. Consider the metaphor of childbirth. The pain of labor is intense, but for many women, it's made bearable by the knowledge that it's bringing new life into the world. The suffering has a clear purpose, a clear meaning. While not all suffering in life has such a clear purpose, we can often find or create meaning in our experiences if we're willing to look for it. This search for meaning is not about glossing over pain or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about finding a way to integrate our painful experiences into the larger narrative of our lives, to use them as stepping stones for growth rather than... Now, let's talk about resilience. Resilience is often misunderstood as the ability to bounce back quickly from adversity to return to our previous state. But true resilience is about more than just bouncing back. It's about bouncing forward. It's about using our challenges as catalyst for growth, emerging from difficult experiences not just intact, but enhanced. Resilience isn't something we're born with or without, but it's a skill that can be developed, a muscle that can be strengthened. And one of the best ways to build resilience is through mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment, observing our experiences without judgment. Mindfulness allows us to create a space between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting automatically to challenging situations, we can pause, observe our thoughts and feelings, and choose our response. This pause, this space of awareness, is where our power for growth lies. By practicing mindfulness, we also develop the capacity to be with discomfort without immediately trying to push it away or numb it. We learn to observe our pain with curiosity rather than fear. And in doing so, we often find that the pain transforms. It may not disappear, but our relationship to it changes. We are no longer at the mercy of our pain. We become its witness, its student. This brings us to an important point: the role of surrender in growth. Now, when I say surrender, I don't mean giving up or becoming passive. I mean surrendering our resistance to what is. It's about letting go of our need to control everything, our insistence that life should. There's a Zen story that illustrates this beautifully. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. At one point, they came to a river with a strong current. As they were preparing to cross the river, they saw a very young and beautiful woman also attempting to cross. The young woman asked if they could help her cross to the other side. The two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows not to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, and carried on his journey. The younger monk couldn't believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless, and an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, then 3. Finally, the younger monk couldn't contain himself any longer. and blurted out as monks, "We are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you then carry that woman on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him and replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?" This story beautifully illustrates the difference between physical reality and the reality we create in our minds. The older monk did what was necessary in the moment and then let it go. The younger monk, trapped in his ideas of what should and shouldn't be, created suffering for himself long after the event had passed. How often do we do this in our own life? How often do we carry the weight of past events, of things we can't change, creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves? True growth comes when we learn to put down this burden, to surrender our need for things to be different than they are. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop trying to improve things. It means we act from a place of acceptance of the present moment rather than resistance to it. We work with reality, not against it. Now, let's talk about the role of practice in growth. Growth isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we participate in actively. It requires consistent effort, patience, and perseverance. It's like tending a garden. We need to water it regularly, remove the weeds, provide the right nutrients. We can't just plant the seeds and expect a lush garden to appear overnight. This is where daily practices come in. Meditation, journaling, exercise, studying, these are all tools that can help us cultivate growth. They create the conditions for insights to arise, for patterns to be recognized and changed. They help us develop the mental and emotional muscles. We need to navigate life's challenges. But here's the key: practices themselves often involve a kind of suffering. Sitting in meditation can be uncomfortable. Journaling might bring up painful memories or realizations. Exercise can be physically demanding. Studying can be frustrating when we don't understand something. Yet it's through this voluntary engagement with discomfort that we grow. We're essentially training ourselves to be with difficulty, to move towards challenges rather than away from them. And in doing so, we're expanding our capacity to handle whatever life throws our way. The role of patience in growth. In our fast-paced, instant gratification culture, we often expect quick results. We want to solve our problems now, to feel better immediately. But real growth, deep transformation, takes time. Think about how long it takes for a mighty oak tree to grow from a tiny acorn. It doesn't happen overnight. There are periods where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, but beneath the ground, roots are growing deeper, becoming more established. Your growth is often like this. There may be times when we feel stuck, when we can't see any progress. But if we're patient, if we keep tending to our inner garden, growth will happen. Sometimes the most significant growth occurs during these seemingly fallow periods. Now, let's talk about the role of community in growth. While much of what we've discussed might seem very individual, the truth is that we don't grow in isolation. We're profoundly interconnected, and our growth affects and is affected by those around. When we're going through difficult times, having a supportive community can make all the difference. It's not just about having people to lean on that's important. It's also about having mirrors. People who can reflect back to us aspects of ourselves we might not see, who can offer different perspectives, who can challenge us to grow in ways we might not have considered. Moreover, as we grow and transform, we naturally inspire others to do the same. Our willingness to face our challenges, to be vulnerable, to do the hard work of growth, can be a powerful example to others. In this way, our individual growth contributes to the growth of our entire community. This brings us to a crucial point: the ethical dimension of growth. As we grow and develop, as we increase our capacity to handle life's challenges, we also increase our capacity to impact the world around us. With this increased power comes increased responsibility. True growth isn't just about becoming stronger or more resilient for our own sake. It's about becoming more capable of contributing positively to the world. It's about expanding our circle of compassion, deepening our understanding of our interconnectedness with all of life. As we grow, we naturally become more aware of the suffering of others. We become more sensitive to injustice, to environmental destruction, to the myriad challenges facing our world. And with this awareness comes a call to action, not from a place of anger or self-righteousness, but from a place of deep care and connection. This is where our personal growth intersects with our role in the larger human story. As we heal our own wounds, as we transform our own suffering into wisdom and strength, we become better equipped to help heal the wounds of our society and our planet. Now, as we near the end of our exploration, I want to circle back to where we began. Remember, the invitation is not to seek out suffering, but to be willing to face it when it inevitably arises. It's about developing the courage to stay present with our experiences. Pleasant or unpleasant, life will provide us with plenty of opportunities for growth. Our job is to be open to these opportunities, to say yes to life in all its complexity and richness, to be willing to be changed by our experiences, to allow life to sculpt us into ever more conscious, compassionate beings. I want to leave you with this thought. You are far more capable than you know. Within you lies an infinite capacity for growth, for transformation, for love. Your challenges, your sufferings are not obstacles to this capacity. They are the very means by which it's revealed. So I invite you to embrace your journey, with all its ups and downs, to trust in your innate capacity for growth, to be patient and kind with yourself as you navigate life's challenges, and to remember that in choosing to grow, in choosing to engage fully with life, you're participating in the grand, mysterious dance of existence. Thank you for your attention, for your willingness to explore these deep waters with me. May your journey be rich with growth, with insight, with moments of profound beauty amidst the inevitable challenges. May you always remember that you have within you everything you need to face whatever life brings your way. Thank you, and may you go forth with courage, with compassion, and with an open heart ready to embrace all that life has to offer.